All right, everyone. So 3 minutes past 11, we might make a start. So before we get started, I just want to quickly acknowledge that I'm on Gunai country today. I want to pay my respects to all elders past, present, and emerging, and I want to acknowledge all the other traditional lands you're all joining from today. So my name's Charles Solomon, or CJ Solomon, Charles Jr. And my role here at Glawak is the Aboriginal Business Development Manager. So my role is to help small businesses in the Gunai region, to help grow Glawak as an organisation and to help economic development in general across the region. I just want to give a quick shout out to Troy McDonald, our chair of the board, who's going to be watching here today. So shout out to Troy. Before we start the welcome to country, I'll just run through a bit of housekeeping. So I think we've got a slide we'll pop up for housekeeping, and we'll talk around how today's going to shape up in terms of functionality. So at the top left, you'll see that we're recording this session. So if you've got any issues or concerns with that, please let us know in the chat. Let Jess know, who will be monitoring the chat. You can minimize the whole screen if you like by hovering on the top right. If you've got problems with the audio, you can check your settings there, your audio settings. In the chat, if you've got any technical issues or any dramas at all, please alert Jess and she'll address those for you. So there's two main functions in regards to communications here. One is the chat. I can see heaps of people joining the chat there. With your questions later on in the Q&A, please post your questions in the Q&A, which is you'll see it next to the chat. You can click the Q&A button, and that will give you that function to ask a question later on. Please, throughout this presentation, you can ask some questions and we'll address them in the Q&A if you like. But that's good. The next thing we'll run through is what today is going to be looking like. So how we'll go through the running sheet. So after I run through this, we're going to hear from Uncle Grattan, who will be giving us a welcome to country. We'll hear from Brian Stevens from Warrigamala, who was the author of the Aboriginal Economic Strategy for Gippsland, and he'll be talking about the strategy itself. We're lucky enough to get the Ministerial for Employment, Minister Yala Pulford. She's been kind enough to share her time with us today, and she's a great ally of us, and so it's going to be awesome to hear from Minister Pulford. After that, we'll go straight to the Q&A and the panel discussion. So as I said before, ask some questions throughout the presentations, and you can ask them live also in the Q&A. And we'll have Brian, who'll be staying on for the panel discussion, Scott McCartney, who's the CEO from Kinaway. We have Craig Hocking from Mudgee, and we have Roger Fenwick, who's the CEO of Glawak. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Uncle Grattan Mullet, who'll be giving us a welcome to country.
Thanks, CJ. Good morning, everyone. Womaninji, Nadja Badri Netul Makta. I'd like to begin by honouring our ancestors of our traditional lands on Gunai country as we continue to follow in their footsteps. And I'd also like to acknowledge and pay respects to our elders, past, present, and those that are emerging. We also like to just acknowledge our communities on behalf of Glawak across the Gippsland region, as it's important to, when we're looking at this particular strategy, that it encompasses the aspirations of our communities and reflects the good work that Glawak is doing on behalf of our communities across Gippsland. And it also demonstrates the work that we are doing, and particularly with our key partners, to really to look forward to, the future opportunities that this particular strategy can offer a lot of our people across Gippsland who have initiatives and ideas around building their own businesses. I'd just like to congratulate everyone who's been a part of this particular work. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this particular document. So thanks to everyone who's been involved and who supported this piece of work. I think it's a fantastic document that will see future growth and prosperity, and particularly, the legacy that it can offer our people across Gippsland as well. Our key partners, it's stakeholders and key partners are also important in the work that we do here at GLAWAC. I'd also just like to acknowledge and thanks the Minister for her time this morning to be a part of the launch of our Aboriginal Economic Development Strategy for Gippsland. Thank you.
Thanks, Uncle Gratz. Deadly welcome. And next up, we've got Brian Stevens. So Brian Stevens is a proud Gunai man who has a deep understanding of cultural knowledge and Aboriginal community protocols, which is supported by a career that spans over 3 decades. Warriga Mullet is an Aboriginal owned and operated business that has extensive experience in providing professional services to a range of clients, encompassing organisational and leadership activities. Brian has worked in shaping government policy with a focus on health, arts and cultural tourism, and Aboriginal leadership in economic development. These attributes and qualities have provided us with the ability to engage and deal with complex governance systems and planning processes. Brian is the author of the Aboriginal Economic Development Strategy for Gippsland. So thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thanks, CJ. Before I start, I'd like to just building on and say thank you to Grattan for that warm welcome to country, and to also acknowledge our ancestors, our elders, past, present, and those who are emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm calling it in on the land of the Bunurong people, to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and those who are emerging. But also like to say, also extend say hello to all the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are joining us today, and to also acknowledge the elders that are calling in from the various parts of country that have joined us on the launch of this piece of work that's been in the making for about 12 months now. So I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot and an overview of, I suppose, the process that we used and some of the key findings that came through. And it's just building on what CJ and Grattan have been talking about in terms of the legacy. One of the things that sort of came out of the consultation phase was that was to be mindful of the fact that there has been an enormous body of work done in Gippsland over many, many years, and the elders who have led that in terms of taking up the fight in terms of setting up our community organisations, and the legacy that they've put in place for us to be sitting here today should not be ever underestimated. And I think it's something that we need to celebrate. So one of the things was really about honouring and our culture and our ancestors in terms of the work that they did to get us here today. So, this is a piece of work that is not set in stone. It, when we started the consultation phase, we recognised that it would be very difficult for some people to actually engage because of the COVID situation that we found ourselves in. So we were very mindful of that and ensuring that we could create opportunities wherever possible to allow people's voices to be heard. So, what I want to say is that the strategy is a reflection of the aspirations and the voices of the community across the whole Gippsland area. There are people that may not necessarily have that opportunity to plug into the space. So therefore, it's a document is going to move and evolve and respond to the environment that it wants to work in, and those community members who want to play in this space. So there's going to be ample opportunities to contribute to the ongoing growth and development of this strategy. So I'd like to also give a big shout out to my colleague, Deb Blabler from EMS Consultants, who worked alongside me with this piece of work. Without her, we wouldn't have been able to do and achieve the outcomes that we're presenting for you today. So I'm not sure whether Deb's on the call, so I just want to recognise her contribution. But I also want to recognise the contribution from the community members who did plug in and participate. And we had, lots of conversations, and what we asked of them was to be really open and honest with us. And we got that, and it was really quite rewarding to hear that those messages come through. So the strategy is a reflection of where we are at this point in time. So one of the things we really wanted to focus on that came out of it was really looking at playing to our strengths. So, the culture, caring for our country, the arts, hospitality, organisations have been doing an amazing job working in the health space. And so the strategy is, designed in a way to actually pick up on those key starting points. So it was really about finding a platform that we could actually springboard off. And so the strategy is designed in a way to build that momentum, but also to take the opportunity to build on that work. I think the thing that also came out from some of the elders was to also recognise that that our mob have been doing commerce and trade long before we got to where we are today. So, there's a lot that we can learn in terms of the cultural knowledge and reaching back into our culture and sharing that knowledge between ourselves to help build that strength that we're looking for in terms of the resilience and supporting our young people who may want to step into this space. One of the big things that we found in stepping into the space was also a strong emphasis on our young people. It's a given. There was a need to really look at, building the succession and making sure that the opportunities for young people in terms of careers could be much more clearly articulated. And so having those conversations sooner rather than later, but also thinking about business and entrepreneurial aspects of what a career could look like. So, there was a strong focus on opening up a conversation around the trades and how you could leverage off that in terms of stepping into the business world. There was a need to also focus on looking at women in business, and that came out quite loud and clear. And I just was reading something the other day where current studies indicate that women-run business is on the rise here in Australia, and so 2/3 of the net new businesses created in Australia is at least a decade where were founded by women. So I think there's something that we really do need to focus on when we're thinking about this strategy. It's about how we can engage in this space more effectively when it looks about how do we support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women to step into the business space. A strong focus on the need for more family-run businesses. One of the other areas is looking at the need for startup funding, given that we've had the historical marginalisation, so not having access to home ownership. But people have great ideas, but that startup funding is a bit of a blocker. One of the other areas that was a big focus was access to timely and accurate information, and so there was a need to look at a much more effective coordination and communication, and so that would form part of the strategy moving forward. One of the areas that I really like to talk about is more focused work in terms of embedding the language of business and know-how into our community. So we need to start being mindful of and dropping in that space to actually dismantle some of the perceptions and barriers that have probably been put in place unknowingly, and our mob not seeing the opportunities because they don't see themselves in there. So a lot of the work that I think we need to do, and I know the organisations and what we're doing in the community is addressing this, but is that if I can't see myself in there reflected back, then I'm not going to be able to achieve and step in this space. So, and I'll finish with the need for, which is a given anyways, collaboration and partnerships, opens up a huge opportunity for our communities and our community organisations to start thinking about enterprise. So I'm going to leave it there, and I know they're going to be on the panel. If there's other questions later, we can open up then. So I'm going to hand you back to CJ.
Thanks for that, Brian. And yeah, it's great to hear from you and the journey that you've been on in developing this strategy. So thanks for talking about that. And as Brian said, if there's any questions for him, please feel free to ask them in the chat. Now I'd like to introduce Yala Pulford, the Minister for Employment. So Yala is a member for the Western Victoria region, is the Minister for Employment, Minister for Innovation, Medical Research and the Digital Economy, Minister for Small Business and Minister for Resources. So Yala has played a significant role in the government's COVID-19 response, which has included record investment in small business support, massive investment in COVID-19 and other vital medical research, the establishment of the Australian Institute for Infectious Disease and support for local mRNA manufacturing. Yala has overseen employment programs that are providing a career lifeline to thousands of Victorians displaced from work by the pandemic, while also supporting social enterprises and small to medium-sized employers. Yala has been a strong advocate for the innovation and tech sector, recognising the sector's role in improving people's lives and generating the jobs of the future, and is of course fully supportive of our strategy that we're launching today. So thank you for your time, Minister Pulford, and I'll pass over to you.
Thanks so much, CJ, and good morning, everyone. Can I also thank Grattan for the welcome and acknowledgement of country, and would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we're all meeting and joining, and in particular I'm presenting today to you from beautiful Gunditjmara country. I've managed, because I live in regional Victoria, to get away from home for a few days, and so in beautiful southwestern Victoria. Of course, though today, in particular, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country for which the strategy is focused, the Gunai people, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And of course, to acknowledge all Aboriginal people joining us today for this really, really important launch. Thanks, Brian. The work that you have done through Wallagmalla in supporting Glawak and Gippsland's Aboriginal communities shape and develop a fantastic and very, very local strategy is wonderful. And hearing you talk about the ambitions and the ideas and also the values that underpin it was wonderful. So thank you, Brian. And I could also like to acknowledge Roger Fenwick, CEO of the Gunai Lands and Water Corporation, Troy McDonald, the chair of Glawak, as well as the rest of the board, and Scott McCartney, CEO of Kinaway. We've had a few discussions over the last year, more than a few really, about Aboriginal economic participation being much more than employment programs and much more than some, bridging a gap exercise. This is so much more about aspiration for people at all ages, at all stages of life, and some really, really big ideas. And that includes really successful Aboriginal owned and controlled businesses, of course, in turn then providing amazing, not just employment, but whole career opportunities and creating a, whole ecosystem of real, of great commercial success and wealth creation as well. And so having strong business is such an important part of this. And again, Brian reflected on that as well. So while we're all doing this virtually, I do very much look forward to returning to Gunai country. It is a truly spectacular, very special part of Victoria, and half your luck to those of you that are there today. Glawak, please accept my heartfelt congratulations at this impressive and comprehensive economic development strategy for the region. It was wonderful a few months back to get a briefing and to hear a bit more about what you had in the works in the development of this, and it's just fabulous to see how it's come together for today. This last, 20 months now has been an extraordinary period of change for everyone around the world. And our Aboriginal businesses, our Aboriginal community has risen again to the challenge, and will, I think now, as we're only a few weeks away from a much more open economy, be able to embrace opportunities to grow and adapt, which is exciting, and it's been a long time coming, but we're nearly there. It's tantalisingly close. Some of the work that I've been doing with a number of people on this call and others is supporting your work on the Victorian Aboriginal Employment and Economic Strategy, VAES. I suspect by the time we launch it, it will have a different name, but that's its working title. So, you know, this is very much about realising Aboriginal self-determination in economic development and full economic participation. The council that guides the development of this strategy held its third meeting back in May, which was terrific. And its Career Caucus, the VAES Career Caucus, is supporting the new statewide strategy, which is all about employment and economic development goals and aspirations. We will, so regional and local economic development approaches like this strategy articulates will be, I think, incredibly important for the success of the delivery of the whole statewide strategy. It will be a wonderful thing to have locally owned plans that are in place that all sit within that framework that's developed and determined by Aboriginal people. So Aboriginal Victorians and traditional owner groups, including GLAWAC, play such an important future role, a current role, of course, but I think we really want to see that just blossom in the economic recovery that is in our very near future. We've been delighted to be able to work in partnership with the Gunai-Kurnai people through the pandemic to make sure businesses survive. And of course, some are doing heaps better than surviving, really thriving and growing and changing, but also to keep people connected to employment as best we can through periods of economic downturn, all of the while guided above all by the need to keep our community safe. I know how important it is that Aboriginal people can thrive economically, and also that all Victorians can gain a much deeper and more profound understanding of the importance and values inherent in the vibrant Aboriginal cultures of our state. So over the last 18 months, it's been a busy time. Obviously, this strategy and its development has been a huge amount of work for everyone involved. CJ's new role as Business Development Manager, I think, sort of reflects the new and future direction. We've been able to support the expansion of the GLAWAC Natural Resource Management and Registered Aboriginal Party Office in the Latrobe Valley. It was one of the things that was great to be briefed on in May. And of course, support for employment, cultural tourism, the water partnership and land management projects in response to the pandemic and those awful, awful fires that you all had to confront sort of right through that summer up to and including February 2019. Just a couple of comments as well, CJ, if I may, on our government's commitment to self-determination. So our commitment to Aboriginal self-determination is based on the recognition that we only achieve stronger outcomes for Aboriginal Victorians when that is led by Aboriginal voices. The new national agreement on closing the gap, signed in July last year, aligns with Victoria's approach in empowering Aboriginal communities and people. It includes the Victorian government's commitment to advancing self-determination through the Victorian Aboriginal Affairs framework. And of course, the strategy for Gippsland will play a key role in furthering Aboriginal economic participation, but also supporting education and training. It's impossible to ever see those things in isolation. So our government works in partnership with the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, and work is well underway to establish the elements required to support future treaty negotiations. We are deeply committed to a treaty process that will deliver meaningful self-determination and provide real benefits for traditional owners and Aboriginal Victorians. And through that treaty process and ongoing work to advance Aboriginal self-determination, determination. There is an exciting conversation underway about what a new relationship between the Victorian government and Aboriginal communities could look like. Treaty will help us to heal and strengthen relationships that have historically been damaged and damaging, and treaty will contribute to the well-being of the state, obviously for our First Nations people and Aboriginal Victorians, but I think for the well-being of the entire Victorian community. We recognise that the Victorian Aboriginal community has long made clear without truth there can be no treaty, and that's why the Truth-Telling Commission is now established and will occur in parallel with the treaty process to make sure that the treaty is underpinned by commitment to truth. The treaty may also present an opportunity, I think, to support the implementation of this strategy and support traditional owner groups to determine their own priorities in relation to economic development and partnership. So congratulations. I'm thrilled to be able to join you for the launch. The Aboriginal Economic Development Strategy for Gippsland is, I think, the first of its kind, with this approach that is so very local and so very much embedded in both the lived experiences and the known and existing expertise, but some really terrific plans for the future and goals. I think that everyone who's been involved in it can be incredibly proud of. So to all of you who have developed and designed and toiled away at this strategy, it's terrific and well done. The thing about a strategy, though, is the really exciting bit is when work starts on its implementation. So I certainly give you my word and that of our government that we are very excited about the next steps as we go from developing the strategy to seeing the strategy come to life and the change that we're all committed to, the growth and opportunities that we're all committed to being able to be seized and become real. So to Roger and the team at Glawak, Gunai elders and the entire Aboriginal community across the Gippsland region, wish you all the very best for the delivery and implementation of the strategy. Congratulations again, and thank you for fabulous work.
Thanks so much, Minister Pulford. And again, yeah, thanks for your time today and your commitment around this strategy and what the strategy means. So yeah, it's great to have you come and talk to all of us today. And so with that, I will start to introduce our panel members and our Q&A. So I'll just ask the panel members to turn on their cameras if they don't mind, thanks. And I'll introduce them as they come on board. So also, as I'm introducing them, please feel free to ask questions. I can see there's a couple there already, but please keep them coming and we'll try and answer all of them. So first up, we've got Brian. So Brian Stevens. So we've already done a deadly introduction for Brian, so I don't think we need to introduce him again. We've got Craig Hocking, so from Mudgee. So Craig's the Director of Environment and Cultural Works. Craig, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yep, thanks. So Craig Hocking, Director of Environmental and Cultural Works at Mudgee. So I work closely with Parks, DELP, EGCMA around environmental contracts on country, and putting back in on the land on country.
Thanks, Craig. We've got Scott McCartney, the CEO of Kinaway. Scott?
Yeah, hey CJ. Scott McCartney, proud Wallachabolic man from Western Victoria. I'd just like to also acknowledge the lands that I'm on today. I'm actually in WA on Noongar country, joining you from WA, but you're looking forward to the discussion today. Kinaway Chamber of Commerce, we support nearly 400 Aboriginal businesses around Victoria. And we've seen some interesting growth over that period of time, the opportunities for Aboriginal businesses and looking at what economic recovery looks like post-COVID. It's great timing for this strategy right now because the opportunities for Indigenous people in particular and the goodwill from corporates and government as well, putting sort of money where their mouth is now and making some significant investments in Indigenous businesses is really, really exciting.
Thanks, Scott. And we've got Roger Fenwick, CEO of Glawak.
Thanks, CJ. Yeah, great to be here, and I too pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging who guide the work that we do across Gippsland. I'd also give a shout out to traditional owners right across Gippsland. There's obviously GLOAC covers a large area of Gippsland where we work collaboratively with our neighbours as much as we can. And yeah, we're doing some good stuff with Mudgee and other partners. So really looking forward to that, and really proud of the work that Brian and the team have done in setting this, getting this strategy in place, and the role we play in employment. And we're keen to be working with the community down the valley to really expand our operations down there. And as the Minister said, adding jobs and recognising the real importance of healing often comes from people being in work and stable positions, but also being reconnected culturally and to country. And so we're really open to work with people to try and support that. So yeah, congratulations to everyone, and glad to be here.
Thanks, Rog. So we've got the first question from Patrick. So it's directed at Brian. Feel free to contribute, panel members, after Brian. So it says, Brian, can you suggest some practical ways we can dismantle barriers to entry into business? And I might quickly touch on that first before you answer, Brian.
Yeah, good. Go for it.
So this strategy outlines a community-led governance group to try and tackle some of these actions. But before Brian suggests some of those practical ways, there are some more supports around us here in community. So my role is to have a yarn with community members to make their ideas come to fruition into business. We've got a great resource in Scott at Kinaway, who has a vast network in business support and helping people start their own businesses. But Brian, did you want to touch on some of those?
Oh, look, I think you've just, what you've just mentioned is really good. And I think, what the Minister was talking about before is this needs to be led by community, and having community engaged at the very beginning. So if you're looking at wanting to roll out programs to support, Aboriginal people getting into business, make sure that they're engaged early on, not as a later down the track, because it's sort of, that's some of the messages that come out very loud and clear, is that the more that we can understand the starting points, the easier it's going to be to allow people to actually engage in the programs and supports that are going to unfold. So building those networks, engage with the local community. These people have the finger on the pulse. They have clear ideas about what they want to do. So that's what I would be suggesting, is really about getting back down to the basics and actually sitting and engaging and talking up front, and sooner rather than later.
Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add around that, around some of the barriers?
Yeah, I think you guys covered off pretty well. There's a couple of obvious barriers. One is obviously access to capital, which is just an ongoing challenge. But secondly, having that enough notice, have enough time to put a strategy in place to do a real business plan, look at the opportunity to make a sustainable business. Too many times do I hear about opportunities coming up and it's a last thing they think of. Oh, maybe we can get Indigenous business to do this, or maybe it's an opportunity to talk to a TA group about creating an Aboriginal business. And we all know planning a business is much bigger than going to a Bunnings sausages, where you take your sausages and your buns and you've got a business. It's a bit more to that. So put probably a bit more thought into the planning process. And then there's really innovative ways that you can get access to capital if you get a bit more planning.
No, thanks for that, Scott. And I think you've both nailed it there. So the next question is from Bruce. So it says, does GLOAC perceive the post-COVID period as an opportunity to reset the economic development agenda in the Gippsland region? And I'll put that to the panel, but I would say I would agree with that. I think we have to utilise the time while the economy's hamstrung by lockdowns and whatnot. We need to utilise that time to plan and set that agenda and the way forward. The tourism business is a great, opportunity and industry to do that. And a lot of tourism businesses in general, not just Aboriginal tourism businesses, they're utilising this time now to plan forward for when the economy does open up.
Yeah, CJ, I might jump in if that's okay with other members. And so the short answer, Bruce, is yes. GLOAC's definitely very active in a range of different sectors. Identifying capital is sort of definitely, as Scott mentioned, part of the challenge for us, and we're working closely with our own resources, but also with government to see how we can build that through things like our RSA negotiation and other things. But partnerships are crucial. So the work that, and Brian talks about that as one of the key focus areas, the relationships and partnerships in the strategy. And that's something we've been really working hard on to make sure we've got those foundations. So little examples. So through the Working for Victoria Fund, where we've been feeding the mob through our Bush Cafe and working with all the ACCOs in Gippsland to distribute these meals, we're now working to transition that to the Lake Ties Trust so they can continue it on through a business model. And that's really, even though it might be seen as a little thing, there's employment with it, there's actually networking, there's transport, there's logistics, there's a whole lot of skills that get built up. And that, along with the cultural opportunities here at Forest Tech with the Bush Cafe, as you said before, our NRM team, the expansion of work is pretty exponential at the moment, and our teams are now starting to bid into larger and more complex projects. And we're really keen to work with community leaders in the Valley to progress the same thing, and focusing on some of the hard things which Brian talks about in the strategy, which is people job ready, are people comfortable, are they connected to the right people? And we're really keen to play a significant role in that space, so we can really set an agenda into that Gippsland region. And in about a week's time, we'll be announcing a fairly significant land purchase, and Troy McDonald will lead that, which will bring huge opportunities for the community and the wider Gippsland region. So yeah, we're certainly really looking forward for the opportunities. Water-based tourism, small to medium, and yeah, really high-end joint venture stuff to really small opportunities for community members to run their own cultural tours or other bits and pieces. So I think we are well positioned, and we want to be able to share that knowledge with others too. We've got the luxury of having been operating for about 10 years now as a corporation, so we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. And so sharing that in a collaborative way, I think, is really important, so everyone can benefit from these things without it being seen as some sort of competition about right and wrong. I think it's important for everyone. So yeah, we're really keen now. We've got a strong partnership with Kinaway, and probably my last message is for all of our partners as well, is we're constantly conscious of the community not being bombarded with 55 individual little nice sort of low-hanging fruit things from government or shires. So we're definitely keen to try and really coordinate and have opportunities to simplify these pathways, as Brian talked about before. So, and that doesn't mean we'll ignore opportunities, but trying to coordinate it through this community-led group will be a really important next step for us. Thanks, CJ.
No worries. We've got a question for the Minister that's come through from Jason. Jason, if you don't mind, because we don't actually have the Minister on this panel session, we might take this one on notice, but it actually feeds in some ways into the next question. So if you like, we can find our answer for you there, Jason. But the next question is from Kate, and it says land development in Gippsland is booming. How can this strategy best take advantage of the current momentum? I think you alluded to some of that, Roger, in you alluding to the announcement that's coming up. But from a strategy perspective, Brian, did you want to touch on some of that if you had any ideas?
I think, as you mentioned there before with Roger has sort of touched on that, but, I think there's opportunities also in terms of as partnerships, joint ventures, the work that, is happening in Mudgee around looking at land-based type activities, the bush foods and native food industry is a huge area that's starting to take off. So, once again, it's about, being in front of and being aware of these opportunities coming through. And as Roger alluded to before, about making sure that we've got a very much more coordinated approach in terms of information and access to, and how do these things happen? It's about what are the types of supports and tools that need to be put in place to enable these sorts of things to take hold. So yes, land is one of the critical parts of being able to conduct business. So, if you're looking to go into large scale grow out, whatever that may be in terms of the horticultural industry, that requires access to long-term reliable land and resources to make it happen. So, I think, someone like Mudgee might be best to have a chat and maybe shine a bit more of a light on some of those opportunities as well.
Craig, did you want to add to that?
Just with respect to the native foods and the cultural plants and even native environmental plants, I think that's something that Mudgee is looking into very keenly. Obviously, we're limited to what we can grow in the area. There's some native plants here. Do we bring in other native plants? Are they going to work well? So there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into account. One thing I'm picking up on is, we've got this really good framework now to build on and assist businesses in sort of, and I suppose it's like a mentoring document. I think the big thing is, ensuring that we have that availability of and that access to what people need to start up their businesses or get that information. And Kinaway's there, CJ, you're there. I think the big thing is now really putting that out there to community, having that accessible, because we've got a lot of opportunity in Gippsland to move forward now. Not only there's a lot of money around post-COVID, but there's still a lot of money around post the bushfires. And economic development is a big part of that as well, and economic recovery. So I think the opportunity is here now. I think we just need to provide that to community and assist them along the way.
Thanks, Craig. We've got one more question, and I'll just mention, before I do that, I'll mention that the comment from Uncle Damien Bell: traditional owners need exemption from stamp duties to increase the return of country for all reasons. So that's a really good point, Uncle Damien. So,
Jay, I might just expand on that just for the listeners. I think there's two things from, and totally support Craig's answer, from Kate's question and Damien's comment that Scott mentioned before around access to capital. And I think all traditional owners and Aboriginal people are working often from a poor base from, land was taken away. And the state's definitely supportive now of, through settlement agreements and other types of agreements and eventually treaty, to try and redress some of that work, but it's a long journey. So I think there's two key points I want to reinforce. Is one, that collective negotiations might bring some really powerful stuff. So a team was working together. So we've got connections to Vic Forest, for example, and we're happy to work in with Mudgee around some potential opportunities in that space. That's just one example. Purchasing of land is obviously really expensive. Aboriginal people can't access farm forestry, fish farming, renewable energy, without land often. And so there's some innovative ways that groups have been starting to explore that. The Tunarong, for example, with their solar, Ramiak have just done a little thing in their patch of land. But I think we've got to keep really pushing for that investment opportunity at the capital end to give people opportunity. And one of the perverse outcomes is some of the rules in the current way of the world is that stamp duty and land taxes apply equally to Aboriginal, which is a bit of a perverse sort of outcome where it was their land in the first place and now they're being charged stamp duty. So we're working, GLOAC have got a particular issue they're working through at the moment. We're sharing with a lot of our other TO colleagues, and we'll certainly work with government to see if we can redress some of those sort of policy matters down the track. So yeah, there's a bit going on in this space. And my last point is it's really important we have strong and sustainable long-term partnerships. So one of the things we're very mindful of is we don't have people just come in and try and be opportunistic to set something up, and by having an Aboriginal partner gives them more legs, and it's that we see through that pretty quickly. And it's most our great partners obviously don't do that, and I think Brian and Scott talked about getting in early and having a strong relationship with groups and individuals. So it's not it really is coming from the Aboriginal space and thinking, and it's being supported by other agencies and organisations or private investors rather than it sort of being opportunistic from others. So there's a bit of a balance there, but certainly our partnerships can sort of help progress those things. Thanks, CJ. Thanks,
Rog. As we're pretty time poor, so as we wrap up, but I just want to mention this last question. So it's from Patrick. It says we've highlighted the current challenges, involvement from inception, realistic expectations, needing well-developed strategy and access to capital. As the public and private business communities and markets grow in awareness of the unique value that can be unlocked by Indigenous businesses, do we have an idea of the emerging challenges as the business strategy is implemented? And I might just quickly touch on that. So, and even as the Minister alluded to at the end of her talk today, is, you know, the launch of the strategy is not where it ends, it's actually where it begins, and it's where all of this hard work starts. So, you know, Brian's done a big body of work in getting a sense of what community want, what barriers community are facing. Then it also suggests some actions around tackling some of those barriers, and it proposes what a community-led governance group would look like to help drive some of this work moving forward. So the first step is to get the word out to community who in the Gunai Kurnai community and Aboriginal people living on Gunai Kurnai country who here wants to be involved in help driving this, because this is where it all begins. And that's probably what I would say to address some of that, but the challenges are very much outlined and very much spoken about. It's how we come together as a community and tackle this and continue to provide a voice, not just to government, but to the wider business community. Did anyone else want to say anything else before we wrap up?
Just quickly, CJ, I think Patrick's question's really insightful, and you know, I think focusing on positive stories and case studies is part of the answer, Patrick. You know, there's a propensity in our current media and political environments to potentially pick up little matters relating to Aboriginal people and politicising them, and that's probably a challenge to answer Patrick's question, that we've got to you know, keep out of that sort of I'm trying to find the right words, it's the extreme end of the debates, and really focus on the positive opportunities so kids and community members can see the opportunities going forward, and try and keep away from some divisive commentary that occasionally. But that's sort of part of a wider societal conversation. But certainly that's one of the challenges. Working really closely with government, no matter what colour of government it is also really important, so that we get a consistency across political cycles. I think that's another thing we've got to try and work towards. But bit of a red wine conversation maybe, but thanks for the question, Patrick.
CJ, can I just build on that? I think
Yeah.
the thing too here is about, and Roger started to talk about, was that we need to reclaim the narrative and we need to drive it forward. So, and you know, the reason that, you know, we're talking about building on the legacy, there's been a massive body of work being done over many, many years. And we need to celebrate that and recognise it. And as Roger alluded to there before, there's this propensity to go back into the deficit space all the time. And you know, we're strong, proud, resilient people. And there's strength. We need to really leverage off the strength that actually sits within our communities. And our young people coming through want to see that. They want to be able to see a pathway in terms of their future, because at the end of the day, this requires us a long-term investment, as the Minister talked about earlier. This is the starting point in what you just spoke about, CJ. It's about building on this now. And our people in the community need to be stepping forward to actually drive the narrative in terms of what it is that they're looking for into the future. So that's what it's all about. It's about that self-determination. We need to be the ones that sit at the table now determining what the future is going to look like for us.
Thanks for that, Brian. And if no one else would like to add anything, I think, yeah, we'll just end it on that note. And I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. So I think we had up to about 90, nearly 100 people online here today. So it's great to see. And of course, thank the Minister for her attendance. Of course, thank all of our panel members, Scott from Kinaway, Craig out at Mudgee, and of course, thanks, Rog, and a special thanks to Brian. Brian, you've done an amazing job in pulling together a strategy that's so detailed, and you've done it through lockdowns and, you know, all this other stuff going on outside of this. And it's just a hats off to you, Brian. Great job. And look, thanks everyone again for attending today, and looking forward to speaking to you all soon.